Hey my dudes, how you doing? I hope you're having a damn great day. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something slightly different. We're going to be replicating my personal career mode tactics into FC24. Of course, if you would like to and you follow the career mode as a whole, and you'd see I alternate the tactics every now and then, I've gone with something different for the newest season of lots. Of course, you've got Champions League football, so I've adjusted the tactics accordingly to try and, you know, combat the likes of the fantastic teams that we will be facing in the Champions League, as well as also trying to compete for the Premier League title, or maybe even just the top 4 race. So yes, we're going to be looking at those tactics. Of course, these are not realistic tactics whatsoever. These are just my personal tactics for my career mode. So if you can and you do enjoy this video, I think they're quite helpful. Hit that like button down below, subscribe if you are new, and like I said, these can be very, very, very effective tactics, so you guys can let me know down below if you like them or not. So, starting off with the formation at hand, of course, it is going to be a 4-2-3-1 wide, and the only real thing that I have done is I've brought the fullbacks in ever so slightly. This does help with the inverting that you do require out of them, as well as I've widened the wider midfielders, having them, you know, up against the touch lines on either side. So it is 1 goalkeeper, 2 centre-backs, 2 fullbacks, 2 DMs, 2 wider midfielders, 1 attacking midfielder, and then of course 1 striker. So moving on to the tactics and the tactical vision that I've gone with from day dot, from the championship days, is gegenpressing. Of course, I think it best suits the free-flowing, very aggressive nature to the team. Of course, trying to score as many goals as possible, trying to entertain you guys as best as I possibly can. But I do enjoy the way that the team sets out with this tactical vision in mind. As for the defense and the defensive style set to pressing after possession loss, I think this also helps. Very aggressive counter-pressing system. It does help with trying to repel the opposition. They aren't going to be as forthcoming when it comes to throwing men forward, or when they get the ball back, trying to play very aggressively through our press. They're going to be very cautious with it, and that's more or less what you're trying to do. You're trying to lay down the law the minute you get the minute you lose the ball. As for the team width, I've set it to around 20. Now this does create a nice compact unit. Of course, with the inverting fullbacks, it's going to be quite nice. It does help and lend itself to the compactness of what you're trying to produce on the defensive end. As for the depth, however, it is set to a high line, set to 70, or a mid-block to high line. It does help. Sometimes you can be exposed, but very far and few, because you are teetering on the edge of a mid-block / a high line. So it does offer the best of both worlds, in my humble opinion. And of course, it does help with the offensive outlet. Of course, having your fullbacks get nice and high up the field, having that nice high line, and it helps in and out of possession. As for the offense, the build-up play I've set is to fast build-up, as well as the chance creation set to direct passing. Now, of course, this does go hand in hand with the gegenpressing system, so you can't really change it too much, but I do like it. I do prefer it. It does encourage your fullbacks to get nice and high up the field. At the same time, with the direct passing, it does encourage your forwards, sometimes your midfielders, to try and break in behind and trying to penetrate and exploit the space that the opposition will try and leave in behind their defense. As for the width, I've set it to 40. Now this does create a nice compact system when going forward with the ball. It does help with the inverted fullbacks, of course, having your wingers be the widest players on the field, hugging the touchdowns, creating a lot of the width down either flank. And it does allow them to create those 1v1 situations, because they sometimes can be so isolated on either flank. It does allow for either for them to have a lot of space, or for them to be up against very little of the opposition players. So you want to try and center your attacking outlet through the middle of the field as much as possible, and that's why I've set it to 40. As for the players in the box, however, I've set it to 7, of course, more times than not, and we have seen this through many other tactics videos. I think 7 provides a perfect balance. It can provide your attacking front 3 to be able to get into the box, and every now and then it can also allow for 1 or 2 other players that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be in that attacking area to try and break into that final third. Onto the corners and the free kicks, as per always, I've set it to 4. So taking a look at the instructions, starting off at the back with my man Freddie Woodman. He has been absolutely phenomenal. But of course, as always, because you are starting with a high line set to 70, you would require him to be a sweeper keeper. And then, of course, I think it's a very favorable tactic to try and set your goalkeepers to come for crosses, even if they aren't really that way inclined, unless you are replicating realistic tactics, of course. But for a career mode save, I always try and encourage my goalkeepers to be very aggressive. You would rather have them try and come out and claim those aerial balls than try and stay on their line and maybe be exploited in the air, or having your defense exploited from a potential corner or maybe a free kick or something like that. So therefore, more times than not, I always go with a come for crosses approach, as well as trying for them to be a sweeper keeper. It does depend on the line that you are playing, though. Anyway, into your backline, your 2 centre backs. For the likes of Timber, I want him to be a very aggressive ball-playing centre-back that does every now and then join the attack. So therefore, I've set him to join the attack. Now, be aware that if you have these exact instruction sets, you can sometimes be exposed, you can sometimes be caught out in the backline, and if you are keeping up with the career mode, you will see every now and then I do tend to slip up. But I do like the aggressive nature of it, so therefore with the ball playing centre-back in Timber, I want him to be able to join the attack and get forward. As for the likes of Branthwaite, he's going to be the more conservative, more of the sweeper of the two. He's going to look to try and mop up anything and everything that Timber, that gets past Timber essentially, so therefore he is set to conservative. As for your two fullbacks, slightly differing roles. For the likes of Lloyd Kelly, of course, he is a centre-back that I've converted into a left-back. He's the more physical of the two, but he does tend to get forward every now and then, which I quite like. But for his instructions, I've set him to stay back while attacking, as well as the run type needs to be inverted, of course. This does help with the inverted nature of your fullbacks, as well as, because he is going to be the centre-back that more or less tries to stay back as much, he is going to be told to step up, be very aggressive, be very imposing, get nice and tight to his player, forcing them to try and switch play or try another route to the attacking phase of play. As for the likes of Connor Bradley, of course, the more attacking of the two, he is going to be told to join the attack as well as invert. You want him to still do that. And then for the defensive positioning, it is set to stick to position. You don't really require him to be too aggressive in that manner. Okay, so onto your double pivot. Of course, this is something new that I've brought in for season number 4 of the career mode. Sosa and O'Reilly being the double pivots that I've gone with for most games. So Sosa, he is set to be a bit more of the defensive midfielder of the two, of the double pivot. So he's going to be told to be a bit more zonal, cut passing and try and intercept as much of, and break up as much of the play as possible. But for the attacking support, you want him to stay back while attacking. If there was the opportunity for him to drop between the defenders, I would tell him to do that. I think it's more effective as well. But nonetheless, he's going to be told to stay back. And then finally, for the interceptions, it is set to conservative, allowing him to have a bit more of a calmer approach to trying to break up play and allowing him to not be out of position more times than not. As for the positioning freedom, I want both of my DMs to be able to cover the center as well as be the deep lying playmakers, allowing for either or to drop between, collect the ball, and then look to try and progress it forward. Of course, we're trying to play a very good possession-based brand of football that does have the offensive outlets of a quick, fast counter-attack. Moving on, though, to the likes of Matt O'Reilly, he has been sensational since signing him. Of course, he does have a slightly deeper role for this season, but I quite like it for him. Although I do think that with this role, his offensive outlet has been somewhat reduced, but I do like him in this role. I know it's a bit counterproductive, but I prefer him. Anyway, moving on though. He's set to cut passing, and you also want him to have a bit more of a zonal approach. But for the attacking support, though, you want him to be able to get forward, join up with the likes of a Conor Gallagher, a McAtee, and a Haraldsson as well. So you want him to be able to get forward and allow himself to express himself on the offensive end. As for the interceptions, I've set into normal, allowing him to have a bit more of a bite to his defensive outlet, looking to try and chase balls every now and then, trying to win it back very effectively. And to be fair, he has done that countless times throughout the early stages of this season. Onto the likes of the positioning freedom, just like with Sosa, he's going to be set to a deep lying playmaker as well as cover the center. Now, of course, with cover the center, you can manually drag them into those wider areas of the field to try and cover whether the fullback's out of position or maybe one of the wingers hasn't tracked back enough. So you can look to try and use your two DMs to your advantage by dragging them out of position manually and trying to overload the opposition in those wider areas. As for your number 10, Conor Gallagher, he has been sensational. If you haven't seen the recent videos in the career mode, check them out. He's been amazing, phenomenal. As well as the career mode videos that are coming out this weekend are fan-damn-tastic. I'm actually recording this after recording those, so there are a few changes that you will see throughout those videos. But anyway, check them out, please. That would be fantastic. But anyway, for his role going forward, a basic defensive support. I quite like him in this role. It allows him to sometimes drop a bit deeper, help out, lend a good helping hand, especially when you are under the cosh. But at the same time, he can choose to stay forward for a potential counter-attacking opportunity, as well as trying to link up very effectively with the striker. Onto the likes of the support on crosses, I've set him to balance. Now, he does tend to get into the box a lot more than what I would have thought, but with it set to balance, it does allow him to sometimes stay on the edge of the area as well. For the positioning freedom, you want him to drift wide, help out in those wide areas, trying to create overloads in those wide areas, trying to overload the opposition, pull players out of position, allow for the likes of Matt O'Reilly to maybe function in that number 10 role every now and then, and even allow for the wingers to try and cut inside and maybe take up that number 10 role themselves. Onto the likes of the interceptions, of course, Conor Gallagher in real life has a very good temperament to his game. He's very aggressive on and off the ball. He looks to try and work very hard for the team. So I wanted that when bringing him in. So therefore, aggressive interceptions is set to be on form. And of course, this does help with the counter-pressing system that you will be trying to run. So onto the likes of McAtee and Heraldson. Now, I will say this. I wanted more natural wingers coming into this season. So therefore, the likes of McAtee is a left-footed player on the left, as well as the likes of Heraldson is a right-footed player on the right. Both of them have the same set of instructions as well. So, for the defensive support, you want them to be able to come back on defense and help out the fullback as much as possible. Staying wide is going to be essential. Like I said earlier, you want them to be able to hug those touchdowns, create those 1v1 situations with the opposition fullback, almost having them isolated in certain moments. But it does allow you to have some really good switch of play moments, whether you have the likes of Connor Bradley in possession and then you switch it to the likes of McAtee. He will more times not be 1v1 with the opposition player, and that can allow you to try and take on that player. Maybe if you do beat them, you have a lot of space to try and work with and trying to create a nice opportunity on the offensive end. Into the likes of the support runs. Now, the main reason for it being set to balanced is you don't want to force the get in behind approach. Of course, with the fact that the offensive outlet is set to direct passing, they will naturally look to try and take those opportunities more times than not. But if the opportunity is there, you don't necessarily always want to try and force that. So therefore, I think a more balanced approach does really affect the offensive outlets of this team, because you can allow for your wings to come inside a bit more, link up very effectively with the midfield, or maybe even be a bit more of a physical target man back into the opposition, link up with those wider players in the wider channels of the pitch. So it does help add different dynamics to the offensive system. Onto the likes of the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive. It does help with the counter press, the very aggressive gegenpressing system that I am trying to replicate. And then finally, for the support on crosses, I have set it to stay on the edge of the box. Now, obviously, you want your wingers to be able to cross the ball in very effectively, allow for players in and around them to be able to make those attacking runs. But because I have also set players to get into the box set to 7, your attacking wider players tend to, occasionally make those attacking runs every now and then. And I quite like that, to be honest. And then finally, we've got the likes of Sanko, an absolute revelation. So for his role going forward, it is set to support runs being set to balance, so he can try and drift, and he does link up very effectively with Conor Gallagher, especially when the likes of Gallagher does choose to stay forward, as well as trying to make those overlapping runs of the striker. So it does allow for him to pull players out of position very effectively, open up wide gaps in the opposition's defense, and therefore allow you to try and exploit it. Onto the likes of the attacking runs, I've set it to mixed as well. I want to try and showcase the likes of Sanko and all of his abilities, so therefore the ability for him to get in behind, be a target man as well as be a false 9, it does help a lot, especially when it comes to drawing players out of those very key areas for the opposition defense. Into the likes of the interceptions, I have set it to aggressive, of course, trying to press the opposition's 2 centre-backs as well as their goalkeeper, forcing them into errors and mistakes at the back. And then finally, for the defensive support, you don't necessarily require him to drop a bit deeper because you do have a number 10. So therefore, stay forward, be an offensive outlet on the counter, potentially linking up very effectively with the players in and around him. So my other formation that I do tend to switch to every now and then, especially if I am playing a lesser team or I'm chasing the game, or potentially if the opposition are being very hard and stubborn to try and break down, I more or less will try and revert to this formation, the 3-2-4-1 system, modeled after the likes of Pep Guardiola, but a few Brom Squad alterations here and there. So I think it's very effective. I think it's amazing to use. It does help very, very much with the breaking down of the opposition defense. So I would advise you guys try and use it. So for the formation going forward, I manually changed a whole lot of positions. I used the 3-4-3 flat, and then obviously I drag players in and out of the positions that you see here. So it is going to be 1 goalkeeper, 3 centre-backs, 2 DMs, 2 central attacking midfielders, 2 wider midfielders, and then of course your 1 striker. Onto the tactics now. The tactical vision is still set to gegenpressing, with every single other instruction being set to the same. So there's no major changes to it. Of course, corners and free kicks still being set to 4, players in the box still being set to 7, width still being set to 40. There's no major changes whatsoever. Onto your instructions now at the back, with the likes of Woodman here set to come for crosses and be a sweeper keeper. Again, no major changes to the tactical instructions, so therefore you wouldn't really require any major changes to the goalkeeper. As for your back 3, now there is a slight alteration from last season's offensive formation that I went with the likes of Lloyd Kelly now starting into the back line. So for the likes of Branthwaite, again, taking up the more natural role as the sweeper, the more conservative of the three centre-backs, whereas the likes of Lloyd Kelly and Timber, because they can both play as a left back as well as a right back respectively, I do want them to try and drift into those wider channels, help support the likes of a McAtee and a Connor Bradley in those wider areas every now and then. So therefore, I've told them to overlap, and then in terms of the other instructions, it is set to the base set of instructions. As you'll see for the likes of Timber, he's got the same role as well. Onto your double pivots, of course. For the likes of Sosa, he's going to be told to cut pass against, but for the attacking outlet, you want him to be able to slot in between the defense, looking to try and take the ball off of the back line, look to try and, you know, shore up the back line. If there is a potential loss of possession and a potential counter-attack, he can look to try and join up as best as he possibly can and try and shield that defensive three as much as he can as well. For the interceptions, I've set it to normal, and then for the positioning freedom, just like with before, it is set to being the deep lying playmaker. But the first major change that we do see is the defensive positioning. I've told him to cover the wing. Now, because more naturally you have a back three, they're not looking to drift into those wide areas, and if they do, that's fine, but you can be exploited in the central areas as well. So you kind of want them to maintain on the defensive end that central approach and allow for your fullbacks, sorry, not your fullbacks, your DMs to act like fullbacks and drift into those wider areas of the pitch. As for the likes of Matt O'Reilly, of course, a bit more of a box-to-box role. So he is going to be told to have his base set of instructions all being set on a balanced defense for the defensive behavior, looking to try and maintain his position as best as he possibly can. For the attacking support, also set to balance. Of course, he does have two more attacking players just in front of him, so you don't necessarily always require him to break forward and, you know, link up with the offensive outlet players as well. So more so, if there is an opportunity, he can get forward, but if not, maintain the position and make sure that at the back, at least, you are very structurally sound. For the interceptions, I've set it to normal, and then just like with the likes of Sosa, you want him to be able to collect the ball off of the backline, play it forward, be the linking chain between the defense and the midfield, if not the defense and the offense. And then finally, just like with Sosa as well, he's going to be told to cover the wing. Onto your two attacking midfielders, of course, Haraldson as well as Gallagher. Now, Haraldson as well as Jed Wallace have this role, I will say that. So if you do make subs, make sure you are subbing the likes of Jed Wallace in for a Gallagher or, of course, a Haraldson. So, like I said, both set to the same set of instructions. Defensive support, both set to basic. Support on crosses, also set to balance, allowing them to break in that attacking area, or maybe stay on the edge of the box and try and facilitate a bit more. But the most important thing is you want your number 10s to more or less drift in and out of the little half spaces, pulling players in and out of position and looking to try and create from those weird and awkward areas of the field. And it does allow you to have a bit more freedom on the offensive end of things. As for the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive, and again, this does help with the counter-pressing system. As you'll see here for the likes of Gallagher, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Onto your two wingers, both of them, both Connor Bradley as well as James McAtee, are going to be told to have the same set of instructions. So you would require both of them, because you're not necessarily playing with fullbacks, you would require both of them to drop back and help out on the defensive end as much as possible. But for the chance creation, however, you want them to stay wide, you want them to hug the touchline, you want to try and draw players out of those central areas as much as possible, because of course you are playing with a four-man midfield, so therefore there's not going to be that much space to try and operate in. So pulling players out of position from the opposition is going to be essential to trying to have this formation and these tactics work very effectively. For the support runs, again, just like with before, you don't necessarily always require them to break in behind. Sometimes having them come a bit deeper, having them come a bit shorter, linking up play very effectively from those wider areas can be a great dynamic approach for this offense. Onto the likes of the interceptions, it's set to aggressive, and then finally for the support on crosses, I've set it to stay on the edge of the box, looking to try and whip in as many crosses as possible, or trying to facilitate from those wider regions of the field. As you'll see for the likes of Connor Bradley, he's got the same role as well. And then onto the likes of Sanko, of course, the striker, he does have a very different role compared to the balanced approach. So for this role, I've told him to stay central now. More so, I don't really require him to drift along the backline as much. I would more or less require him to stay central and be the focal point in the attacking outlets of this team when it does progress the ball forward. For the attacking runs, because you will have so many players and bodies moving in and around him, you would more or less require him to be the more central player, linking up play with the players in and around him. You would require him to use his physicality to the best of his ability, to be fair. And therefore, a target man approach does best suit the system, in my personal opinion. You don't necessarily require him to be making those runs in behind nearly as much as you would with this system. As for the interceptions, I've set it to aggressive, still looking to try and press the opposition's backline and their goalkeeper, forcing errors and mistakes potentially. And then finally, for the defensive support, I've set it to basic, allowing him to sometimes drop a bit deeper, drop off of the backline, open up a bit more space for the number 10s in and around him to try and drift into, as well as having the ability to sometimes stay high up the field and be a linking chain in a potential counter-attack. So there you have it, guys. That is my Season 4 West Brom Career Mode tactics. If you have enjoyed this, please hit that like button down below. There is going to be another tactics video out later, so stay tuned for that. And I'm not going to rank this one out of 10. I'm going to allow you guys to do it. So if you have gotten to this point in the video and you have enjoyed it, and you obviously hit that like button, subscribe, but let me know if you've tried out these tactics. Let me know out of 10 what you would rank them. Anyways, until the next time, I'll see you guys later. I'm out.